On today's show, Russell Westbrook is the new starting point guard for the Clippers. What has the Russ experience been like so far? Plus, why are the Clippers struggling to close out teams late in games? First, the Kings, now the Denver Nuggets. What is going on with Ty Lue's coaching and rotations? It's all coming up right here at Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Tonight, how about taking Luka Doncic to score more than 26.5 points? What about Giannis Antetokounmpo to have more than 9.5 rebounds? How about Devin Booker to have less than 6.5 assists? Or maybe we even go with Ja Morant to have less than 2.5 three-pointers made. So what is Prize Picks? It's daily fantasy sports, but how does it work? Basically, you pick 2 to 6 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times back on your money on any entry that you submit. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. That's NBA, of course, NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA. They've got you covered for everything. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. They're safe. They offer incredibly fast withdrawals, currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. So download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. That means if you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Clippers, Darian Vaziri. You can follow wherever you listen to your podcasts and on YouTube. Just search Locked On Clippers. And man, Darian, the Clippers were involved in a couple just insanely entertaining, super competitive games against the Kings on Friday, then the Nuggets on Sunday night. Managed to lose both games. The Friday night game against the Kings, the second highest scoring game ever in NBA history. We're going to kind of unpack some of what you saw from these games and how it relates back to the Clippers, but not to overshadow the big news. Clippers added another new player to their roster, Russell Westbrook, who you said on this very podcast a couple weeks ago when I asked you about the idea of adding Russ, you said you were kind of, against the idea of bringing him into this Clippers team. So now that he's a part of the LA Clippers and you've seen him play in a couple games, he's starting, which is just crazy to me that they brought him in to be the starter. How do you feel about Russ in this role for this Clippers team?
Well, when I heard the news, my thoughts from when I just came on the podcast a couple weeks ago hadn't changed. But after these first 2 games, I'm actually really enjoying the Russ experience. I think he's really added something to our team because we haven't had this good of a passer since Chris Paul. We really haven't. So to have somebody that really hits guys in their shooting pocket, doesn't make shooters adjust to have to catch the ball, those little things really make our ball movement feel crisper. And also, I now understand why Paul George wants the ball out of his hands, because, man, Russell Westbrook's criticism throughout his career has been his crucial turnovers and bad moments. But if you really pay attention to the Clippers and have been paying attention to Paul George over the last 6-7 years, he is no better. And I found out a stat from one of our beat writers that Paul George actually averages more turnovers on the drive than Russ in terms of turnover percentage when he drives. So Russell Westbrook so far, I think, has been awesome. The only thing is, closing games is a little tough because the ball just tends to find non-shooters at the end of games. And in the Nuggets game, they didn't close with him. But that's, I think, in my opinion, puts him in a position where he can't mess up and can't be scapegoated. I've really liked Russ these first 2 games, and his defensive activity has been better than I expected. And his rebounding is really, truly a breath of fresh air. And we obviously know he can still get to the rim. And the thing everyone was saying about we have more shooters absolutely has been a good fit. So far, I'm actually really loving Russ. I don't think he was at fault at all for the Denver loss. You can say a little bit Sacramento, but I think there were other reasons in the Sacramento game much bigger than Russ and the reasons we lost.
Well, even when you look at the Sacramento game, the crazy thing is Russ fouled out of that game in the second overtime, and then the Clippers didn't score the rest of the way. Yep. After Russ exited the floor, it was game over. The offense just kind of stagnated and completely stalled out, which is, to your point, right? The ball movement and what he's able to do, kind of getting other guys involved, right?
I think also, besides that, Paul George was on this minutes restriction Yet he played 41 minutes. Doesn't sound like much of a restriction to me. And then they didn't let him go over that threshold, I guess, when we already were in double overtime. And when Russ fouled out, there was a close-up of Paul George saying, "Can I finish the game? Can I finish the game?" And he didn't get put back in. So now you have Kawhi Leonard, who already has the quad condition and gets load managed for a reason, in a double overtime game, playing more minutes in a game than he's played in his entire Clipper tenure without Russ or Paul George out there. He kind of lost his legs. And, the Kings are a young team, and De'Aaron Fox is like maybe a year older than me. Like, he can run for days. So he's not going to get as tired as a guy like Kawhi. Yeah, that was really tough when we didn't score after Russ went out of the game. And it was exacerbated by Paul George also not being in the game.
And do you envision Russ's role moving forward? I mean, the fact that he walked into and became the starting point guard just outright, I was pretty shocked by that, honestly. Do you envision him as the starting point guard for this Clippers team just moving forward? Or do you think this is going to be a flexible thing where that position might change a little bit, depending on matchups or whatever moving forward, like in the playoffs?
No, it's not going to change because Ty Lue and Paul George were very adamant about this. They were very adamant that they wanted a guy that's truly recognized as a point guard. It's very clear what's happened this season. Lawrence Frank and Jerry West feel a different way than Ty Lue, Paul George, and Kawhi do. Those three want a guy like a Russ or a point guard, a traditional great passer, table setter. The front office is very into the wing heavy. We don't need a traditional point guard approach. And as I said, when Lawrence Frank said, we want a guy that can shoot, that doesn't sound like Russell Westbrook, if anyone knows Russell Westbrook at this point. But because Ty Lue and Paul George are very adamant about this concept, Russell Westbrook will be the starting point guard. And you know what? I honestly don't mind because I've really loved what I've seen from Russ. I think it makes Paul George come off the ball more like we saw in OKC, and I like that. The only thing is it's more important who finishes than who starts. So Russ starting is not a big deal for me. I'm actually very fine because he truly is the best point guard on this roster.
You talk about, finishing some of these games, closing out some of these, and frankly, maybe even just holding on to some of these leads that the Clippers kind of build up and then just seemingly start throwing away at various points in these games. What's going on, and specifically kind of over these last two games against the Kings, the super high scoring affair Friday, and then against the Nuggets? What are you seeing from this Clippers team and why they're struggling to close these games out at the end?
It's very evident. I think there's two reasons. I think one, you can point to Paul George and Kawhi need to just be a little bit better in fourth quarters. But I think part of why they brought in Russ is because they felt that they're handling the ball too much. And by the fourth quarter, they're a little tired. I talked about Kawhi's legs already just a second ago. He needs to be, not overworked. And I think in this Denver game, you saw a great Kawhi down the stretch in the fourth quarter. I mean, he and Jokic were just going back and forth. But the main issue, in my opinion, is Ty Lue this season. I mean, I've said many times on Locked On Clippers, he has not had the same kind of coaching season he's had the last 2 years, but he's been very persistent with two particular players at the end of games that's been to the detriment of the Clippers. One was Reggie Jackson, and he got traded for a reason to basically save Ty Lue from himself. And then the new one that absolutely was a huge reason the Clippers lost to Denver was Marcus Morris. I mean, Marcus Morris his only value is to space the floor, and he can hit contested mid-ranges, which we literally already have two guys that do that. So it's kind of redundant. He doesn't rebound, and he's a 6'8", 230 to 40-pound guy, doesn't rebound, barely gets off the ground, and doesn't cut without the ball, doesn't do the intangible things. We have a guy like Terrence Mann, who has not only played huge and big moments in the playoffs for us, but does so many little things. And legitimately, the data and the eye test back up that he is better than Marcus Morris for this Clipper team in 2023. And another guy doesn't even have to be Terrence Mann, Nicholas Batum. I mean, I rest my case. In this Denver game, the guy was like 3 for 6 from three, did a good job guarding Jokic in the small ball. And then Morris randomly, having only made 2 shots the whole game or 1 shot the whole game, ends the game and plays the entirety of overtime. It's extremely mind-boggling, and it makes me think that Ty Lue and Marcus Morris are just such close friends that Ty Lue just can't do anything about it. I mean, it's really crazy to me. And that's the biggest reason.
So what do you need to see from Ty Lue over this final stretch of the season and kind of going into the postseason and maybe be a little bit rejuvenated or kind of bring back some of that confidence in him as the coach that can get this thing done moving forward?
The biggest thing would be to take Marcus Morris out of the starting lineup, but I don't think he's going to do that. My bare minimum ask is treat Terrence Mann like he deserves to be treated. And there's no reason why the guy that scored 39 points in the biggest game in Clipper history has to prove himself each season as if he's a rookie fresh out of the summer league. And he does so many great things for this team. And at the end of the day, Jackson, defense wins championships. I know that's cliche, but it's been true since the 60s.
It's facts. It's truth.
And Marcus Morris just doesn't have the lateral quickness anymore. Terrence Mann's one of our best point of attack defenders. To end games without two of our best point of attack defenders and Nico Batum and Terrence Mann is just, you're making yourself susceptible to just exchanging baskets. And I think a lot of the times when we lose games in the fourth, it's because we just exchange baskets. We don't get stops. And you saw that against Sacramento. We could not contain dribble penetration for the life of us. So I think if Ty Lue just leans more into a defense-first approach, even though he has such an offensive lens, it'll do wonders for us. Because Terrence Mann's also shooting 39% from three this season and even better in the last 2 months. I mean, the data, the metrics, the eye test, they all back up Terrence Mann playing more, or even Nico Batum. But Marcus Morris, he still gets the nod.
I felt like you were going to finish that off with a "take that for data" quote, but with that, how will the Russell Westbrook experience look with the LA Clippers moving forward? Will Ty Lue be able to adjust his coaching philosophy, his approach over this last stretch of the season and into the postseason? Of course, you'll have us covered for all of that and more over at Locked On Clippers. Darian, I appreciate you stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Anytime.